turned back on in here?
No, I guess not. I haven't even got this one.
See, I turned it off while we're
The mic is muted. The mic's off right now. To turn it back.
Wrong button there. Good morning and welcome to our daily devotional from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn. Very glad to have you with us on this Thursday, December the 1st. And we are studying Psalm 72 this week, verses 1 through 7 and verses 17 and 18. And this morning I'd like to point out one particular feature of this psalm that I think may be helpful to us. And this, as we know, is a prayer. This psalm is a prayer for the king, as well as containing charges to the king as to how the king is to rule. And what I'd like to point out this morning concerns where the righteousness and justice comes from that the king rules with. And of course that will be the Lord. But there's an interesting feature of this psalm that has to do with verse 5 and verse 18. So the psalm begins, obviously enough, as a prayer addressed to the Lord. Give the king your justice, O God, and your righteousness to a king's son. And then there are these three verses. May he judge your people with righteousness and your poor with justice. May the mountains yield prosperity for the people and the hills in righteousness. May he defend the cause of the poor of the people, give deliverance to the needy, and crush the oppressor. And all of those are prayers for the king, that this is how the king will operate. Verse 5 is interesting because in most of the original Hebrew manuscripts, when I say original, I mean the oldest manuscripts that we have, verse 5 actually has the second person rather than the third person. So in most translations, including the two most prominent in our community, the New Revised Standard Version and the New International Version, translate this as an additional prayer for the king. Verse 5, may he live while the sun endures and as long as the moon throughout all generations. In the Hebrew manuscripts, it's the second person that's here. May you live while the sun endures and as long as the moon throughout all generations. And that is, as I said, that is the true text for our oldest manuscripts. The newer translations follow the Septuagint, which of course is a very old translation as well. And they follow the Septuagint in saying that these verses are about the king. There is a kind of poetic consistency here to make it about the king. But there's something really interesting about thinking of these verses that are charges to the king interspersed with verses about the Lord. So that verse 5 could be translated as, may you live while the sun endures and as long as the moon throughout all generations. That could be addressed to the Lord, and of course would be consistent with verse 18, which says, blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who alone does wondrous things. However one chooses to translate that verse 5, it is very clear in the song that the true source of the king's righteousness and justice is the Lord, that this is where the king's righteousness comes from. And an excellent reminder from for all of us that true righteousness and justice does not come from a political leader or the preacher or a civic leader, that the ultimately true righteousness and justice come from the Lord. So let's close with this word of prayer, again from the collection of the prayers of the Puritans. Lord, I'm under no bonds that ought to bind me, or that justly can, against your sovereign right. Other bonds took a place in my heart and the affections of my soul, but they were bonds of sin, which I regret I ever made. I thought I was my own, and I lived to myself. I only pleased and served myself as if I were created for no other reason. And while I pleased myself with imagined liberty and self-dominion, no idol was too despicable for me to worship. My soul bowed down to a clod of clay. My thoughts and desires, hopes and joys, all stooped to trifles, wealth, ease, pleasure, fame. And while I thought I was free, I was a servant to corruption. What have I done, Lord? I have lived to myself and not to you. I have been a stranger to you. I will, through your grace, be so no longer. But now, Lord, through your mercy, I've learned to abandon myself. Your grace appeared and taught me to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts. You have overcome. Enjoy your conquest. I am sorry that you had to contend for and conquer your own. I repent. So, Lord, I here lay myself and all that belongs to me entirely at your feet. All things are of you, and I bring them to you in a willing, joyful offering. What I have in the world is more yours than mine. I desire neither to use nor possess anything without it, being for your sake and by your permission. Flow in with all the mighty powers of your own love upon my soul. You who can raise up children from stones and make them the true, genuine sons of Abraham. And there can be no such children without love. Dissolve this stone, the stone that is my breast. Soften this stubborn heart and turn it into love. Amen. Thank you for joining me this morning from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn, and I hope that you have a very good day. Goodbye.